A 7-year-old girl was left with no choice but to take matters into her own hands to pay for her chemotherapy. This story will shake you to your core as it reveals why she had to do it alone and how her desperate act changed not only her life, but millions of lives permanently. 7-year-old Emma wasn't supposed to be out of bed yet. The chemotherapy from yesterday had left her so weak she could barely stand, but she had counted every bill in her parents' drawer last night. $43,000 in medical debt. She had watched her mother cry in the kitchen when she thought everyone was asleep, had seen her father's hands shake as he looked at another credit card rejection letter. 3 more treatments to go, and their insurance was running out. In the dusty corner of their garage, her grandmother's old juice press sat like an answer to a prayer. Emma's thin fingers traced its worn metal handle, the same press that her grandmother had used every morning until cancer took her too, just 6 months ago. That morning, Emma had overheard the whispered conversation. They were considering stopping her treatments. There wasn't enough money left. The sound of her father's car leaving for his second job echoed down the driveway. Her mother had left hours ago for her early hospital shift, picking up extra hours that were never quite enough. The house felt heavy with their absence, with all the words they couldn't say about bills they couldn't pay. Through the garage window, oranges carpeted the Rodriguez's sidewalk, fresh fallen and perfect. Emma's eyes moved from the fruit to her red wagon, then back to the juice press. Her hands trembled as she reached for the handle, but not from weakness, from determination. She had watched her parents sacrifice everything. Now it was her turn to fight back. What happened next would change not just her family's fate but an entire community, though no one passing by that quiet garage could have guessed that a 7-year-old girl fighting cancer, an old juice press, and an act of desperate hope were about to collide in ways that would ripple through countless lives. Emma gripped the press with both hands and began to pull. Each step sent pain shooting through her tired body, but she kept moving. She had to try. Their time was running out. Emma's story wasn't supposed to end like her grandmother's. A year ago, she had been the girl who raced her bike down every street, who climbed trees to count unripe fruit, who turned cardboard boxes into rocket ships. Then came the bruises that wouldn't fade, the fevers that wouldn't break, and the diagnosis that shattered their world. Her grandmother had been the one to spot it first. "Something's wrong with our girl," she had warned, but everyone was too busy working, too focused on keeping the lights on to see what was happening. By the time they rushed Emma to the emergency room, the cancer had already taken hold. The bitter irony wasn't lost on anyone. The same disease that would take her grandmother 3 months later had been growing inside Emma all along. Before she died, her grandmother had made Emma promise 2 things: never stop fighting, and remember that the old juice press wasn't just a machine, it was their legacy. "They'll try to tell you to give up when things get hard," her grandmother had whispered during their last conversation, her hospital room heavy with unspoken goodbyes. "But giving up is expensive. Fighting is free." Now, as Emma dragged the press toward the garage door, those words burned in her mind. Yesterday's chemotherapy made every movement feel like moving through mud, but she pressed on. She had done the math. Even with both her parents working double shifts, even with no Christmas presents or new clothes or school trips, the money would run out before her treatment could finish. The press scraped against the concrete floor, each sound a reminder of what she was risking by being out of bed. Through the window, more oranges fell from the Rodriguez's tree. Her grandmother used to say that waste was a sin, especially when others were in need. Emma's small hands gripped the handle tighter. She didn't just need money for herself. She needed to prove to her parents that miracles could still happen. She had 7 hours before her parents would return. 7 hours to either change everything or fail trying. As she finally reached the garage door, her legs trembling with exhaustion, Emma made herself a promise. She wouldn't let this disease take another member of her family. Not this time. The red wagon's wheels squeaked against the sidewalk as Emma made her first trip to the Rodriguez's orange tree. Her note on the kitchen counter was simple: "Gone to save us. Love, Emma." Each fallen orange she collected felt like lifting a bowling ball, but she refused to take breaks. Time was too precious. The first orange went into the press with shaking hands. Metal groaned against metal, protesting years of disuse, but then, success. The first drops of juice trickled out, carrying the scent of her grandmother's kitchen. Emma blinked back tears and kept pressing. Her makeshift stand wasn't much, just an old card table from the garage. Her sign, painted on recycled cardboard, read, "Fresh juice, $2. Help me fight cancer." Below, she'd taped her latest hospital bill, not for pity, but for proof. This wasn't a child's game. This was survival. The first hour brought nothing but curious stares. Emma's arms ached, but she kept pressing oranges, remembering her grandmother's words about persistence. Then Mrs. Rodriguez emerged from her house, stopping short at the sight of the small girl working with such intensity. "Emma Maria Martinez." Mrs. Rodriguez hurried down her driveway. "You should be resting after your treatment." But then she saw the hospital bill, saw the determination in Emma's eyes, and something in her face changed. Without another word, she disappeared into her house. Emma's heart sank, thinking she was about to be sent home. Instead, Mrs. Rodriguez returned with 3 things: a basket of fresh-picked oranges, her phone, and a folding chair. "Sit while you work," she ordered, already dialing numbers, "and let me make some calls." What happened next would later be called the Santa Clarita Squeeze by local news. Mrs. Rodriguez's garden club group chat exploded. Within an hour, 2 more juice presses appeared, brought by neighbors who'd kept their grandmother's old equipment. A retired nurse set up an umbrella over Emma's stand. Someone posted her story on social media. Then came the moment that changed everything. A motorcycle rumbled to a stop across the street, and Keanu Reeves, in town filming nearby, walked over to Emma's stand. Instead of just making a donation, he sat down next to her. "Mind if I help?" he asked, rolling up his sleeves. "My mom taught me that the strongest communities are built one glass of juice at a time." For the next 2 hours, Keanu worked alongside Emma, pressing oranges, sharing stories about his own family's struggles with cancer, and listening to her talk about her grandmother. He didn't just throw money at the problem. He showed up, did the work, and made sure every news camera that arrived focused not on him, but on the growing circle of neighbors joining their effort. "This isn't about me," he told reporters. "This is about a community coming together to make sure no child has to choose between treatment and bankruptcy. Emma started something powerful here. Let's help her finish it." By sunset, Emma's stand had evolved into an impromptu community center. Local farmers were pledging fruit deliveries. Medical students from nearby universities offered to staff juice stands across the city. A local business owner started a matching fund for all proceeds. But, most importantly, Emma wasn't alone anymore. As she finally sat down to rest, surrounded by neighbors pressing oranges and sharing stories, she realized her grandmother had been right all along. The real magic wasn't in the juice. It was in showing others how to turn despair into hope, one squeeze at a time. The media dubbed it the Orange Revolution. But that wasn't what changed Emma's life. It was the small moments. Mr. Chen from the corner house teaching her his grandmother's secret honey lemon tea recipe while his hands shook with arthritis. The high school woodshop teacher showing up with his entire class to repair old juice presses found in garages across town. The local farmers market vendors arriving each morning with crates of fruit, refusing payment. Emma's parents discovered her enterprise when they came home to find their quiet street transformed. Her father's keys dropped from his trembling hands at the sight. Their daughter, weak from chemo but smiling wider than she had in months, teaching a group of children how to test oranges for ripeness. Her mother, still in her hospital scrubs, covered her mouth as she saw the collection jar, not just filled with money, but with notes from neighbors pledging everything from rides to treatment sessions to home-cooked meals. "I had to do something," Emma told them that night, her voice small but steady. "I heard you talking about stopping my treatment, but Grandma always said giving up wasn't an option." The next morning, something extraordinary happened at Emma's oncology appointment. Her doctor wasn't just looking at her improved blood work, she was looking at a phenomenon. "Your stress levels are down," she said, puzzled. "Your immune response is stronger. Whatever you're doing." "It's not just me anymore," Emma replied. She was right. Across Santa Clarita, something was shifting. The local high school's environmental club started mapping fruit trees in public spaces. The city council passed a free fruit ordinance, allowing residents to register their trees for public picking. Local restaurants began ordering Emma's Hope Blend for their morning services. Keanu Reeves kept his promise to stay involved, but not with his wallet. Instead, he helped establish the Squeeze of Hope program, connecting children's hospitals across California with local communities to replicate Emma's model. He made sure the focus stayed on the communities, not on him. "The real hero isn't me or any other celebrity," he told reporters during a follow-up visit while helping Emma train new juice stand operators. "It's the 7-year-old girl who refused to let her family drown in medical debt and all the neighbors who jumped in to keep them afloat." The medical bills that had once threatened to destroy Emma's family were gradually being handled, not through any single grand gesture, but through thousands of small acts of community support. The local hospital, seeing the impact of the program, started a sliding-scale payment system for childhood cancer treatments. Other hospitals took notice. Emma's garage now housed a bulletin board covered in photos, children running their own juice stands across the state, elderly neighbors teaching their family recipes to young volunteers, gardens being planted in previously empty lots. But her grandmother's original press remained her favorite, its worn handle now smooth from daily use. "The juice isn't really about making money anymore," Emma explained to a new volunteer, her hair starting to grow back in dark, delicate curls. "It's about remembering we're not alone. That's what makes it magic." 1 year later, Emma stood in the community garden that had once been an empty lot behind the local library. 6 juice stations formed a circle around a central pavilion, where her grandmother's original press held a place of honor. Her hair had grown back thick and dark, her cheeks full of color. The doctors had declared her cancer-free 3 months ago, but that wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning. "Remember to check if they're ripe first," she instructed a group of kids learning the basics of juice making. Some were cancer patients themselves, others were their siblings or friends. All of them wore bright orange aprons with Community Squeeze Crew printed on the front, a design chosen by popular vote at the last town hall meeting. The garden had become more than just a place to make juice. Garden beds bursting with herbs and vegetables surrounded the juice stations, tended by neighbors who'd discovered a passion for growing things. Mr. Chen's honey lemon tea recipe was now printed on a plaque next to his dedicated herb section, where he taught weekly classes on traditional Chinese medicine to anyone interested in learning. Emma's parents had transformed too. Her mother had switched to part-time at the hospital, using her remaining hours to coordinate a network of medical professionals who volunteered their time at community health workshops. Her father had quit his second job, instead managing the now citywide fruit collection program that ensured no tree's abundance went to waste. The Squeeze of Hope program had spread to 30 cities across California, each adapting the model to their community's needs. Keanu Reeves still showed up unannounced sometimes, not for publicity, but to roll up his sleeves and work alongside new juice stand operators, sharing stories and lending his strength to their cause. But the real magic wasn't in the celebrity endorsements or the press coverage. It was in the small victories. The elderly neighbor who found purpose in teaching children about fruit trees, the lonely teenager who found friends while volunteering, the young cancer patient who discovered they weren't fighting alone. A brass plaque now adorned the base of Emma's grandmother's press reading, "Everything made with love has power in it," in memory of Carmen Martinez, who taught us that healing comes in many forms. Below, in smaller letters, "And for Emma, who showed us how to turn love into action." Emma ran her fingers over the worn handle, remembering those desperate first days when she'd barely had the strength to press a single orange. Now, watching kids younger than her confidently operating their own presses, she understood what her grandmother had tried to tell her all along. It was never about the juice. It was about what happens when people stop waiting for miracles and start creating them instead. That morning, like every morning, Emma filled a glass with fresh squeezed orange juice and raised it to the sky. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. "We really did it." Around her, the garden hummed with activity. Neighbors greeting each other with fruit basket exchanges, cancer patients finding comfort in community, children learning that they had the power to make real change. The Santa Clarita Squeeze had become more than a movement. It was proof that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest hands, and that hope, like juice, is sweeter when it's shared. As Emma turned to help a new volunteer learn the perfect pressing technique, another orange fell from a nearby tree. Another child picked it up, ready to add it to the day's pressing. The cycle continued, as it would for years to come, not because of any single grand gesture, but because one little girl had dared to believe that community, compassion, and courage could be as simple as sharing a glass of fresh juice with someone in need. If this story moves you, remember that magic still exists in the world. It lives in old juice presses and fallen fruit, in silent generosity and children's determination. But most of all, it lives in the simple act of helping others, expecting nothing but the quiet joy of making someone else's life a little better. And please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments. See you in the next video.